clinically relevant to endodontics, and many a times we face with perforations and how to deal with it. This is a very, very interesting and very important topic, and I really congratulate the team IDA Condoti for choosing such a topic, and a good faculty like Nasreen. And I wish you all the best. Have a wonderful educational session on this wonderful Sunday morning. Thank you for actually inviting me and joining me in this. Thank you all. Have a blessed day.
Thank you, madam, for your inspirational and encouraging words. Now I invite Dr. Roshni Shabir to introduce our faculty. Dr. Roshni?
Can you hear?
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay. A very good morning to one and all. Our faculty for the day is Dr. Nasreen Mohammed. Dr. Nasreen Mohammed graduated from Century Dental College, Kasaragod in the year 2010. She completed her MTS from KMCT Dental College, Mukkam in 2018. Currently, she is working as an assistant professor in KMCT Dental College, Mukkam. Regarding her family, she is the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. T.T. Mohammed, Koduvalli, Calicut. And she is married to Dr. Abdul Nasser, and she is blessed with 3 children. Thank you all. Awaiting a wonderful section from Dr. Nasreen Mohammed.
Thank you, Roshni. Now, over to the faculty for the session. Thank you.
A very good morning to all. Thank you so much for your kind words. I know it's a Sunday morning, and with the lockdown, and many of us are fasting, so I don't want to, prolong the session all the way. We're a little late, so I'll get right into the topic. So, our topic for today is perforation, its detection, correction, and prevention. Now, it is actually a small portion of a, I hope I'm audible. It is actually a small portion of a huge topic, that is endodontic mishaps. Now, because we cannot cover endodontic mishaps as a whole, because it is being a huge topic, I have selected a topic which is very common, yet it is very annoying. So, moving on, I'll give you a gist of what we're going to cover today. First is the introduction and the classification of endodontic mishaps. Now, that is going to I'll be just going through a few pointers for each mishap. I won't be going into detail. Then we'll be going into perforation. Perforation, this can be further divided into access perforation, including apical perforation. Then we move on to radicular perforation. This can be divided into coronal perforation, middle third perforation, and apical third perforation. We'll also be covering post-phase perforation. Now, all these topics we are going to uh, go under the headings, that is identification, correction, prognosis, and prevention. Now, what is a endodontic mishap? Now, endodontic mishaps are those unfortunate occurrences that happen during treatment, some owing to inattention to detail, others which are totally unpredictable. So, by definition, a mishap, endodontic mishap, is something that can happen due to our fault or just because of the patient's tooth fault. Okay, so it can be both. It can be, but it would always be smart if we can say it is totally unpredictable. Now, an endodontic mishap has occurred. So, what is the first step that we do? First step is obviously the recognition or detection of the mishap. Now, if you don't do that, this first step doesn't happen. You're going for more trouble. So we have to recognize and detect the mishap. Now, it can be through three methods. It's either clinical observation, like uh, here it is clearly visible. The file has nicely come out of the canal, and we don't need a radiograph to confirm that. Second is by radiographic observation. You have detected a mishap. You feel that something has gone wrong. You take a radiograph and confirm. Third could be because of the complaint from the patient. The patient might, during treatment, all of a sudden the patient jerks or says the patient has pain. So this could be another form of observation or detection. A previously fine patient is all of a sudden jerking and shouting. So that could give us an implication that we have made an issue. Now, why is endodontic mishaps important? Why should they not be overlooked? Because these have dentolegal complications. Now, having dentolegal complications, we should understand that they can, our career, our reputation, all are at stake. So we cannot take them easy. We have to give due importance to endodontic, not only endodontic mishap, any mishap for that matter. Now, like I said, it has dentolegal complications. So you have to, the second step is informing the patient. You have to inform the patient. There is no way out. Because even if we don't, the next doctor will for sure inform the patient. So the best way is always giving the information. Like if you have a difficult tooth, you find that the tooth is having a difficult anatomy, you should always inform the patient that, see, we have an issue wherein it will be a bit difficult to do the treatment. So the patient is not surprised. The patient will be more accepting of the situation. And when we do this, we have to tell the patient the nature of the mishap. Also, obviously, we know that because a mishap has occurred, the prognosis would have reduced. We also have to tell the patient about the change in prognosis of the treatment. Now, once all this is done, you have to evaluate. We have to evaluate the situation, and all of us has limitations. So we have to understand if the situation demands or dictates, you have to refer to a specialist. Now, correction depends on the type and extent of the procedural accident. So we're just going through the different types of endodontic mishaps. Now, they can be divided into access-related, instrumentation-related, obturation-related, and miscellaneous. Now, access-related, first thing would be treating the wrong tooth. Now, treating the wrong tooth is the most unfortunate mishap that can happen. So it could be because of a misdiagnosis. It could also be because we have, even after proper diagnosis, we have unfortunately rubber dam the wrong tooth. So in the first case, that is in case of misdiagnosis, you can rectify it. I mean, make sure it doesn't happen by confirming to three clinical or three findings. That is clinical observation. You see the tooth is really bad. Confirm it with a radiograph. Now, if you're still not sure, please go for endodontic testing like cold test, hot test, going for electronic well testing. Also, if nothing works out, you can also go for a test cavity. All this will help in diagnosis. Um, the rubber damming of the wrong tooth, this can be prevented by marking the tooth with a felt pen. So you won't miss the tooth. Next, going into missed canals. Now, missed canals, usually we'll always look for the obvious, that is 3 canals in the upper and 3 canals in the lower. In case of molars, that is usually where we have issues. So this is usually not missed out, but a problem comes when we have additional canals, which normally we won't be looking out for. So one method is to have a non-biased opinion. That is, we should not have a preconception that tooth won't have additional canals. If you're open to that, you're more likely to find new canals. That is one aspect. The second is to check if you have missed a canal is the champagne bubble test. Now, the champagne bubble test is done by, after you have finished your BMP, you've cleaned your canal, what you do is you fill the canals with sodium hypochlorite and check if you have any bubbles. So the bubbles indicate that either there is a missed canal or you have improperly cleaned canal. This is indicative of tissue debris. So you have to go for further cleaning. Another thing is you can take radiographs from distal and meson shifts. This can also help us to detect. I'm sure most of you know this. This is just a refreshing, just going through all the points. Now, damage to existing restoration. This usually happens if you have a crown, that is for your tooth of interest. If you have to do an RCT on a tooth that is already having a crown. So one thing is you have to inform the patient that something bad might happen. Second thing is you could go for a transmetal burr, which is more effective than your normal burr. And while rubber damming the tooth, what you can do is not go for the margin because margins are very fragile. They tend to fracture fast. So what you can do is go a little higher up while rubber damming the tooth. Coming to access cavity perforations, I'll be dealing with in detail. Now going on to crown fractures. Crown fractures is another very annoying and common mishap. Usually this happens because we have done so much of trauma to the tooth. The tooth has undergone so much of access cavity opening. The lot of tooth structure has been lost. The tooth has undergone a lot of irrigation and drying. The sodium hypochlorite dries the tooth and makes it brittle. Also, the chelating agent also removes a lot of, softens the dentine, and a lot of tooth structure is removed. So you should not expect the tooth to be the same. Okay, even usually you find that fractures occur in the second appointment when the patient has gone and returned for the second appointment. So now what happens is you might have to go for extraction or a post. So the whole treatment has changed. So it's always, the easiest way is put the tooth out of occlusion. Okay. Now coming to instrumentation related mishap. First being ledge formation. Now ledge formation usually occurs because we have not reached the apex. Our glide path has not been made. So you have to make sure that your initial filing should reach the apex. If it does not reach the apex, then you tend to form a ledge. Also the use of bigger files earlier on, missing the files, lack of recapitulation, all these problems lead to ledge formation. Now, cervical canal perforation, midroot perforation, and apical canal perforation. Apical perforation I'll be dealing with in detail. Going to separated instruments and foreign objects. Now, these separated instruments is another big issue, very traumatizing because once it breaks, it is extremely difficult to retrieve. I would say the best bet would be to bypass if possible. If it is bypassable, the best way is to bypass. And by bypassing, we should make sure that the irrigants which we use are able to pass in, and this will help to clean the canal. Now, by foreign objects, it is like the tips of instruments, the you find glass feed from the glass feed sterilizer, the restoration which has gone inadvertently into the canal. All these can cause uh, problems during an anodic therapy. So all these have to be looked into. Another better method for picking out, retrieving separated instruments is by the use of ultrasonics. Ultrasonic tips are pretty expensive, so I feel that the easiest way is to bypass them. Now, canal blockage. Coming to canal blockage, thing is usually this happens because we have not recapitulated, we have not irrigated profusely. You have to, the copious irrigation should be done, and also the recapitulation should be done frequently, because this will prevent the canal from getting, what is happening is the debris is getting blocked and compacted. So you're keeping on condensing whatever debris is there. You're not giving it an opportunity to wash out. So these are instrumentation related mishaps. Going on to obturation related mishaps, these are, one is the over or under extended root canal fillings. Now both are problematic. So, but to an extent of 0.5 to 1 mm, it is slightly flexible. There are usually you don't find issues with obturation related mishap. Obturation of that is over and under up to 0.5 to 1 mm. Sometimes it does happen. So when you find that there is not much of an issue with the obturation, but the patient still complains of pain. In such cases, what you can do is you can go for further investigation. It could be that you have uh, uh, extruded into a vital structure. So you can go for CBCT, which is you can get all your doubts. You can rule out all your doubts if you go for a CBCT. So even after a waiting period, the patient still complains of pain, you can go for further investigation. Now, over extrusion, if it is a gross one, it will be symptomatic. More often than not, you'll find that if it is grossly overextended, we have to redo the treatment, or you have to go for, if that is not possible, or if you find that is difficult, you might have to go for surgical intervention. Underextended usually don't cause trouble if our BMP is good enough. We have done a proper BMP, and you find that there is no issue with but the obturation is slightly underfilled. This will not usually cause a big problem. Coming to nerve paresthesia. Nerve paresthesia, again, it is usually due to over instrumentation or over obturation. Now, this usually the prime candidate here is our inferior alveolar nerve. It is usually this nerve that is affected. So in such cases, obviously you have to remove the obturation. And if there is another way of damaging the nerve is nerve toxicity can be caused by sealants which have formaldehyde, like metamethasone. They have formaldehyde which can cause nerve toxicity. So these should be avoided. And now, in case nerve paresthesia is temporary, is okay, it won't cause much of a problem, but a permanent damage has been done. You have to go for either surgical decompression of the nerve root, or and if it is temporary, we can go for systemic prednisolone. Now, coming to vertical root fractures. Vertical root fractures, the problem with them is that they're not clinically visible. We cannot see them as how we usually find the clinical finding is not very visible. If over time you find that there is a isolated pocket on the tooth that is associated with a recently obturated tooth, you find that otherwise there is no periodontal issue with the tooth, but there is an isolated pocket. The isolated pocket is indicative of the fracture that is there. So it is only in this area there is a periodontal communication. This is indicative of vertical root fracture. Another thing is, if on long standing you find that there is radiographic changes, a classic feature of the radiographic feature of vertical root fracture is the J-shaped halo. Now this J-shaped halo is found only around the tooth. So in such cases, you can understand that this is a vertical, because you won't find any kind of fracture or displacement in the radiograph, because there is no displacement, only there is a slight fracture. Now this usually happens when you do vertical obturation. Now vertical obturation, you give a lot of pressure. When you give undue pressure, the tooth tends to fracture. Now this can, another chance of going into vertical root fracture is when you have post placement. Okay, when you place the post, there is, when you give too much force while cutting the tooth, it can also go for vertical root fracture. Here again, in normal cases, what you should do is go for occlusal reduction. So that, you know, as long as the tooth is not in occlusion, there is a very less chance for otherwise, in otherwise cases. In case of condensation pressure, you have to look into that. So vertical root fracture, once it happens, it has very poor prognosis. We have to go for extraction. There is not much we can do for vertical root fractures. Now coming to miscellaneous mishaps, perforation I'll be dealing with. Irrigation related is two main issues usually arise. One is your hypochlorite accident. Second is protrusion of the irrigant into the periradicular space. Both will cause severe pain and the patient will react immediately. So you won't have to doubt much. And now the problem with hypochlorite accident is that you have to counsel the patient, because then the patient will have the typical lesion on the face. So you have to explain the patient. Usually we do not need to do much of treatment. It is resolved on its own, but you do have to give antibiotics, histamines and analgesic. If it is severe, we might have to go for hospitalization. If it is the condition is really bad, we might have to go for intravascular steroids and things like that. Now coming to tissue emphysema, we find that it is not a very common issue, but it usually happens when there is the compression of air into facial spaces. Now this can lead to swelling. It can lead to the crepitus, the typical crepitus sound, and erythema of the area. Now it usually happens during surgeries because of the air that is being pushed into the area after it is open. So one thing we have to do is direct the air outside. Usually what we do is we use a micromotor. Otherwise, we have to use special hand pieces like Impact 45. Now that usually doesn't need any kind of special treatment. Only palliative care is required. But again, if it is serious, if this goes into the airway spaces or mediastinum, you have to get the patient to a hospital. Next is instrument aspiration and ingestion. Now, instrument aspiration and ingestion, again, there is very little we can do. Once the instrument is aspirated, you have to take the patient to a medical facility. Now, the only way we can prevent is by using a rubber dam. So the use of a rubber dam cannot be overemphasized. Now going on to perforation. Now what is a perforation? A perforation is a mechanical or pathological communication between the root canal system and the external surface of a tooth. So it is either mechanical, usually iatrogenic, or pathological. This is according to the Philosophy of Endodontic Terms by American Association of Endodontics. Now we perforated, okay? So should we or should we not go for a perforation repair? is it required? Can't we just, I mean, extract the tooth and go for an implant, or go for an FPD? I mean, do all the trouble, actually pay? So the thing is, according to studies done by Journal of Endodontics in 2017 June and Journal of Endodontics 2013 November, we find that 86% of success rate was seen over a period of 27 months. Similarly, in the other, a success rate of 90% was seen. So the obvious answer being, you have to go for a repair. We should always give the chance to give the tooth a chance for repair. So if that doesn't work out, only should we be going for extraction. Now coming to access cavity perforation. Now what is an access cavity? It is a cavity that is made to allow the locating, cleaning, and shaping of all root canals. Now, when do we perforate during the access cavity? Which is usually when we have opened the chamber and we are looking for orifices. Where does it happen? It is usually in the crown periphery, floor, and the furcation. Now coming to furcal perforation. Why is furcal perforation so important? Now it happens very frequently because once we open, we have this tendency to go on forward. That is when we perforate the furcation. Now, why is it a problem? It is a problem because it has pretty bad prognosis. It has questionable prognosis. Now, it can be divided into microperforation and macroperforation. Microperforation is less than 0.5 mm, which is usually you find that the prognosis is pretty good. Now, macroperforation is when it is more than 5 mm. Again, the prognosis is questionable. This is usually because there is a large area of tissues being damaged in this area. You have a lot of area that is included here. That is the unlike the single rooted teeth, multi-rooted teeth, the area of the tooth and the bone and the junction of the interradicular area, all that is being damaged. The tissue damage is one of the factors which causes questionable prognosis. Now coming to recognition, how do we know that we have perforated? Now, usually, if it is above the periodontal ligament attachment, we find that there is leakage of saliva, which probably we can't understand easily, but the patient will tell you that because there is leakage of hypo into the mouth, the patient will tell you that he can taste something. It's usually the patient will say, bleach choikumende. That is usually what the patient says. Now, if it is below the periodontal ligament, there is bleeding, obviously. And the next way of detecting is you take a radiograph and confirm, and also you can check with the apex locator. Now, the apex locator will give you very abrupt readings because you're going directly into the bone. Because usually it is the readings change gradually. Here there is very abrupt changes in the apex locator. Now, the symptoms associated with furcal perforation, usually other perforations might not be very symptomatic. But furcal perforations, you find that the patient complains. Usually on the next visit, the patient says that he has dull localized pain, not the kind of post-operative pain which we usually expect. Also localized inflammation on the buccal mucosa, tenderness on mastication, and may or may not exhibit bleeding. But one thing I've observed this is my personal finding. I've observed that at least 4 or 5 cases, I found that that a perforated tooth, when you open the second sitting, when you just remove the I don't know if others have experienced, when you just remove the TF or the temporary restoration on top of a perforated tooth, you find that there is profuse bleeding. You can, immediately make out that is not pulpal bleeding. Something is definitely wrong. I think this is usually noted. Please let me know after the talk if you have seen the same. Now coming to correction, usually they do not require surgical intervention. But the key point is doing it as soon as possible, because time is a very important factor for good prognosis. If you wait for a long time, the healing is very much delayed. Now, how do we do the perforation repair? How do we do the correction? First, we have to obviously, we have to locate the right orifices and place a file or GP in the orifice. Personally, I prefer files. And in case of other materials, you have to more or less control the bleeding, otherwise they will get contaminated. But in case of MTA, you don't have such an issue. MTA requires moisture for setting. In case you find, usually when this happens, that is the perforation has occurred, you are usually you're very anxious, you are, frustrated. And if you cannot find the orifice, you can or control the bleeding, because you have your pulpal bleeding, you have all this going on together. What you can do is, if you can just give a calcium hydroxide dressing and call the patient as soon as possible, preferably 1 or 2 days. So when the patient comes back, usually the cavity will be dry. Next, I'm going to describe the technique with MTA. First, we have to rubber dam the rubber dam the tooth, debride the root canal system, place the files in the canals, and after drying the system with canal system with paper foils, you have to nicely isolate. And MTA is mixed according to the manufacturer's instructions. Now use the MTA carrier and dispense MTA using pluggers and the normal pluggers. Your hand pluggers are very useful for the condensation of MTA. What I personally prefer is using a small wet cotton pellet. You can use paper points also, wet paper points. This you can hold using a tweezer. So this can be easily compacted. Okay, and the moisture will also help in setting of the MTA. Now, while placing the MTA, the files should be rotated and they should also be moved up and down slowly, because otherwise you find that the files will get frozen in the MTA. So you have to keep moving them. Okay. Now, after this is done, the obturation is preferably done in the next appointment. Okay. And this has to be done only after confirmation that you have sealed the perforation. It should be confirmed with a radiograph, and only then go for an obturation. Now, if the patient is in a hurry, which very often it is, you can go for obturation. There is no harm, but the thing is, you find that usually MTA takes around 3 to 4 hours to set. So preferably do it on the next appointment, and you have a nice and dry canal. Now coming to prognosis. So because we have perforated, it is especially for cervical and focal perforation, the prognosis is very much downgraded. Now how much? How much depends on the size of the perforation we have made, the existing periodontal condition of the tooth. If the tooth is already having poor compromised periodontal condition, there is an issue. The healing is delayed. Healing is delayed. Another problem is the coronal and the location. Coronal, and like I said, the prognosis reduced. Time lapse is again important. Next is the success of repair. If there is a good barrier, you have separated the bone and the tooth. It depends if there is still communication which we have not detected. Again, the healing is delayed. Now coming to prevention, how can we prevent? There are many things we should be looking into. These are small things, but it has a very important. These are important factors for preventing perforation. Now the first thing is careful examination of the preoperative radiograph. Radiograph is preferably taken with the paralleling technique. This would give us a good idea, almost accurate idea of the dimensions of the tooth. So when you do go into the chamber, you get an idea of how much you have to go. So the paralleling technique is preferred. Now in the radiograph you have taken, you have to look into the extent of caries, the tipping or rotated tooth. These things do matter. Other things we have to look into is calcifications, canal curvatures, and other developmental anomalies of the tooth. Now, if still you don't find things are not very clear, you can always go for shifts in the radiograph. This is by using the Plob technique, that the same side lingual, opposite side buccal. Another thing is, important thing is removing of all pre-existing restorations. If the tooth has a restoration on the other side also, that is if you are opening the mesial, it is always better we remove all pre-existing restorations because there could be underlying caries for one thing. And the other thing is you can, sometimes the restorative material might fall into the canal. Temporary crowns have to be removed. Crowns, this again, like I said earlier, it has to be discussed with the patient and, if possible, removed. Now, while rubber damming, if the tooth is tilted, it is always safe if you can mark the long axis of the tooth. This will help us to get an idea, because after rubber damming, you don't usually get an idea of how the tooth is placed. So you can do this to prevent perforation. Now, one thing you have to look into is you have to align the long axis of the burr to the long axis of the tooth. So just keep that in mind. So even if the tooth is tilted, just have a picture of the tooth in mind while opening. Now stop when you drop. So when you get the drop, the typical drop that we get when we get into the chamber, you have to give a small pause. And then you should be extending sideways. Preferably use safe-sided end cutting burrs and small burrs. These are Muntz Discovery burrs and Mueller burrs. All these help in throwing. They have a long shank with a small tip, so you can clearly see where you're going. Usually it is because of the lack of visibility that we tend to perforate. Now, another problem that occurs while why we perforate is because of inadequate access preparation. We don't have access to the canals. So one thing is to stick to our best to the principles of access preparation. I'll just give you a brief description. One is the law of centrality. The law of centrality states that the pulp chamber is located centrally at the level of the CEJ. So keep that in mind. It's almost at the level of the CEJ. We have to remember that we should be reaching the pulp chamber. Another is, the next is the law of concentricity. Law of concentricity states that the inner wall are concentric to the outer wall. Now, what we can understand from this is the external anatomy will give you a reflection of the internal anatomy. So we can expect where the cusps are there, you'll have orifices. So those kind of things, you can get a picture. The next law is the law of color change. Now, the law of color change says that you have a darker floor and a whiter wall. The darker floor, you can see, is the dentinal map. You can clearly see the lines which leads to the canal. Now, the law of symmetry, here it states that the canal orifice, it is equidistant from a line that is drawn. If you can see this line that is drawn in the mesodistal direction, the canal orifices are usually symmetrical. So if you don't see a canal on this side, it could be that you have missed it. Okay, usually you have them symmetrical. We are talking about the average tooth. Obviously, there will always be contraindication. I'm sorry, you always have changes. This is the normal anatomy. Now, in case of law of orifice location, it says that the canal orifices are located at the junction of the floor and the wall. So, these are seen at the junction. You can see clearly here. This is the junction of the floor and the wall. So, these are a few pointers we can look out for once we are searching for the orifices. Now, coming to root canal perforations. These can be further divided according to their location. That is cervical perforation, midroot perforation, and apical perforation. We'll be going into detail. Now, cervical perforation, this usually happens again when we are looking for the orifice, and usually the inappropriate use of gaze clearance, the GG drills, they have, the cutting is not very, controllable. So it is always, prudent to use the GG drill only when required, or to be very careful while using the GG drill. And also, it can also happen while during the negotiation of calcifications. Now, how do we detect it? Obviously, blood bleeding is there. Now, you have cleaned the chamber, so you wouldn't expect blood. So, previously dry canal having sudden appearance of blood is a uh, feature. Now, rinsing and blotting with a cotton pellet might allow direct visualization. So, if there is bleeding and you're not sure if it's pulper or because of the perforation, you can irrigate and blot with a cotton for direct visualization. Now, in order to enhance visibility, you can go for loops, endoscopes, microscopes, but because it is not very feasible, our very own apex locator and radiograph, both of them are good enough. They can easily suffice for our requirements. Now, coming to correction. Here we might have to see internally and externally because we have gone slightly deeper. So in case of cervical perforations, we find that externally we might have to surgically expose the tooth and do the perforation repair. Now after that, what we do is we repair internally also. So the perforation is repaired internally and externally. Here it is done by using biodentine and it is obturated using GP. So here the surgical intervention was required. Now in case of anteriors, usually our main concern would be aesthetics. So preferably we have to go for white MTA. Gray MTA tends to have a little bit of discoloration. And after the MTA, we go on to put a barrier of GIC and composite. In posterior teeth, we don't have an issue like that. We can go for amalgam, biodentine, MTA, whatever is easy for you or whatever is preferable. We don't have an issue with the aesthetics. Now, in case of large perforations, we find that we might need a barrier. A barrier is given so that the perforation material is not extruded out of the repair area. Okay, so like this, we find that if there is no barrier, it can easily go out. So that will make even more problems. So you have to intervene surgically. So if you keep a barrier, usually calcium sulfate is used or any other hemostatic material can be used. It acts as a barrier and it prevents the extrusion of the repair material. Now coming to prognosis, here, like I said, the higher you go, the prognosis gets worse in case of root canal. So because there is a lower lack of circulation is there. So if the patient now after perforation repair, the patient has developed symptoms, you have to go for surgical intervention. Prevention, all those aspects of things which we went through, that is the use of burrs and all that. Besides that, when you enter into the chamber, what is to keep track of the radiograph so that we know what to expect. Now coming to mid-root perforation. Mid-root perforation usually happens because we have already developed a ledge and we're not aware of it. And what happens is the ledge is developed during the initial instrumentation, and what we do is we perforate into it. Okay. Usually it is seen along the inside of a curvature. Mid-root perforations usually seen in curved canals and usually in the inside of the curvature. Now, a very common area where this happens is in the thin distal wall of a mesial canal. Okay. Now this is the distal wall of a mesial canal. So one is the bulky area or the safe zone. So you can do more, remove more dentine from this side, but this side is very dangerous. If you remove, you will tend to perforate and go outside. So you have to be careful. Usually, and the main tooth that is we expect perforation, mid-tooth perforation is in the lower mandibular first molar. Now, what happens here is when we perforate, we do a stripping. This is usually referred to as stripping. The curved canal is straightened. So you find that the canal, there is straightening of the root canal. Now, this is how it happens. This is the dangerous area. You have removed too much material from the uh, dangerous area. So, so if we have this picture, if we are aware of it, we should be keep keep it limited. Our BMP should be limited in this distal wall and move more onto the mesial wall. How is it detected? Now it can be detected very obviously due to hemorrhage in a previously dry canal. We can also come to know by a sudden complaint by the patient. Now, another way we can easily find out is due to the hemorrhage seen on a paper point. So you can clearly see here there is no hemorrhage in the apical area or the coronal area. It is only in the midroot area. So this is very typical of your midroot perforation. Coming to correction, now we know that it is very difficult because the accessibility is reduced compared to cervical and coronal. The accessibility is very much reduced. So the repair of the midroot perforation is very difficult and it is unpredictable. But NPA has very good results. The results are supposed to be excellent. Another thing we can do is using calcium hydroxide and stimulating a biologic barrier, like how we would do in a indirect pulp capping. But this is a very painstaking procedure, and the results are also very unpredictable. So we have to. This is not a very commonly used one, but it is. I mean, in the text it is there, but it is not predict. The results are not predictable. Now, if it is small and the hemostasis can be achieved, the perforation can be sealed by using a 3D obturation. That is, if your obturation is good, we can very well fill the strip perforation. And one thing we can do is use MTA as a sealant. So wherever you have deficiencies, the MTA will flow into. But if it is large, we find that we might have to use a barrier. Okay, and you should prepare the canal before the perforation prepare, because otherwise it is going to get obstructed. Now, if the internal repair fails, we'll have to go for surgical intervention. Now, coming into the prognosis, we find that stripping and lateral, direct lateral perforation has poor prognosis. Now, this is depending upon the tooth loss of tooth structure. It is a lot of tooth structure has been lost. There will be micro leakage, and there are also chances for fracture of the tooth because it is in the middle. Now, prevention is by pre-curving your files. You find if there is a curvature, please pre-curve the files. That it'll be very much easier. And the instruments should never be forced. Always you have to attain a glide path before we enter into the canal. And never use large stiff instruments inside a curved canal. Another is like I mentioned earlier, the prudent use of GG drills and anti-curvature filings. Anti-curvature filing is filing on the canal wall that is opposite to the curvature, so that you don't harm the curved area too much. And maintaining selected pressure on enlarging instruments. That is, when you have When you have a curvature and you have a risk of perforating, always maintain selected pressure. When you like the walls I showed you, those walls should be maintained, should be worked with selected pressure, and the use of flexible files. Flexible files are very much safe. Now coming to apical third perforation. Now when does this happen? It is usually when the file does not negotiate a curved canal, and another time is when you have not not established the correct working length. Usually what happens is the apical zipping, the formation of an elbow, and another thing that happens is apical transportation. Now apical zipping, that is what happens is when you instrument a normal that is a round apical foramen, because of the straightening of the canal, because of the straightening in the canal, what happens is you get a tear-shaped or a zip-shaped apical foramen. So this can lead to there is a alternation of the apical foramen. Now the problem here is the zipped area will have tissue and dentine debris, and obturation cannot seal the shape. The normal how we need to get a proper tuck back, we need to get a proper resistance. The apical resistance is gone. So there is a problem while if a zip is formed. Now this is usually due to the tendency of the instrument to straighten inside a curved root canal. Now coming to elbow. Elbow, you find that it is usually associated with zipping. When a zip has formed, the area that is the narrow region of the root canal that is having the maximum amount of curvature forms in elbow, because the instrument is coming right over here. This area has a kind of angulation. This is called the elbow, apical elbow. Okay, I hope that is clear. And what happens is because it has your flow is lost because of this shape, you find that it has irregular shape and insufficient flow, and this can obstruct the further cleaning and filling of the apical root of the canal, apical part of the root. Now, correction, you find that in many cases the obturation will end at the elbow. So what will happen is it will leave an unfilled zip canal apical to the elbow. What happens is the elbow will prevent the compaction of the into the apical portion of the root. Now elbow becomes the apical seat because there is a constriction there, and the obturation material is compacted against it. So what we can do is, ideally to prevent this is, we can use warm vertical compaction or thermoplasticized CT in order to overcome this issue. Now going on to apical transportation. Transportation, like the name suggests, there is moving of the position of the canal's normal anatomic foramen to a new location on the external surface. This is very slight transportation. Here it is a little more obvious. This is type 1, type 2, and type 3. I'm not going into details. This is the type 3. That is, there is an obvious difference between the real foramen and the foramen that we have newly made. Detection is again, your patient will have sudden pain, hemorrhage in a previously dry canal. The apical resistance is lost. So initially you had a resistance, but because it has transported, your resistance is lost. Now we can always take a radiograph and find out. Sometimes if it is very minute, we cannot make out. But the paper point test, which I said earlier, can show you if there is bleeding at the tip of the paper point. You can easily find out. Now correction of this problem. The thing is, you have two foramina present. One is natural, and the second is iatric. Now here, vertical compaction is the obturation of choice. if the apical perforation is caused by over
Hello, Nasreen? It's not audible. Nasreen, can you hear? Hello?
post is okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so we were talking about the correction of the apical transportation. So because we would have, if the apical perforation is caused by over instrumentation, we would have lost the real working length. So we have to re-establish the working length, and the obturation should be done with larger instruments, because previously we would have changed the width of the canal. So we also have to re-establish the resistance form. That is, we have to get tugged back. Otherwise, we will extrude the canal. Now, if it is an extreme case where we can't get it back, even with larger instruments, we have to create an apical barrier using. We can do this by using calcium hydroxide powder, MTA. Dentine chips is not our the normal chips, obviously. It is sterilized, and it is compacted. We can also use hydroxyapatite. The prognosis here is very good when compared to all other kinds of perforation. Apical perforation is very forgiving, so it will heal pretty well. Even if there are a few issues, it tends to heal when compared to other perforations. Now, coming to prevention. Prevention is whenever you feel that there is a change in the working length, you have to keep reconfirming. Also, start with very small flexible files, which is always safer. Don't skip files, because suddenly when you skip, you might not be aware that there is a change in working length, and the file may not go to the tip because it is not properly enlarged. Now, recapitulation is also very important. Recapitulation has to be done after every file. Recapitulation is the best, even while using rotary files. Recapitulation and irrigation. You can never do enough of them. You have to keep doing it. This will give you the best biomechanical preparation. Now, avoid the overuse of chelating agents. Chelating agents will combine with the dentine and soften it. So, we do need to use it, but do not overuse it. Copious irrigation with sodium hypochlorite and chlorhexidine, preferably chlorhexidine is the final irrigant, and the use of irrigation systems if available, that is also excellent. All these will help in preventing apical transportation. Now, going on to post-phase perforation. Now, this usually happens due to poor clinical judgment. And another problem that happens is due to improper orientation of the post-preparing drills. Now, detection is again bleeding, and if we haven't crossed on into the frontal area, it could be detected by using a radiograph. Now, the problem with this is if you've done a good root canal, a bad post-phase preparation can destroy your root canal. Correction is by sealing the perforation. If it is large, you can use flowable composite, and if it is small, probably a dentine bonding agent would suffice. Now, going on to prognosis, it is least affected if it is inside. If it is inside the tooth, if it is not gone on into the bone. And in other cases, generally a 15% failure is reported. Now, how do we prevent it? Prevention is by good knowledge of the root canal anatomy, the tooth we are dealing with. The post should be planned only after accurate study of the radiograph. If you've not obturated the tooth, it would be very wise to learn the anatomy of the tooth before you penetrate the tooth. Now, preparing space on the day of the root canal filling is the best option. So then you don't have to go through all these trouble. If using a vertical root, a way of vertical condensation would help if you are planning the same day, because otherwise removing the GP is a problem. And another thing is, if you are using resin-based sealers, it is best because zinc oxide based sealers can retard polymerization of the composite. So if you're using a flowable composite, this can retard. The zinc oxide usual based sealers can retard. Now, coming to perforation repair materials. There are many perforation repair materials: amalgam, calcium hydroxide, IRM, that is intermediate restorative material, gutta percha. All these dentine chips which I mentioned earlier, all these can be used, but the most clinically accessible and easy perforation repair material is GIC and MTA. MTA being the best. GIC is a little, we have to use it in a flowing consistency, but at the same time, it is very hard to condense into the perforated space. Another option is hydroxyapatite powder, and the use like barriers which I mentioned earlier, use of calcium hydroxide, calcium sulfate, freeze-dried bone, MPA, etc. Now, the ultimate goal here is to seal the defect with a biocompatible material and maintain an intact periodontal ligament attachment apparatus. So, if that can be obtained by any of these materials, then that is good enough. Personally, I would recommend MTA. It is the most researched and easily manipulated choice. The only problem being its long setting time. So, if you find a way to go around that, it is probably the best material. So with that, we come to the end of our talk. I hope you're all safe and inside you haven't perforated. Thank you so much for your patient hearing. Have a good day. Over to you, Rashid.
Okay, thank you, Nasreen. And it's a very wonderful section. And now we are welcoming queries. And those who have question, please type in the chat box, and we will hand over the questions to the our faculty. I also inviting Dr. Abdul Rashid EM for moderating the discussion. Hello, Nasreen,
Yeah,
can
I
you
can
hear?
hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a one question from Nurul Islam. He asked about please explain law of eccentricity, concentricity. Can you just
Concentricity.
okay, can you
Yeah.
just explain briefly?
Yeah, concentricity is, it is always usually in the center. Usually, you would expect the when you enter into the axis, it is usually the pulp chamber is in the center, usually at the level of the cemento-enamel junction. So you won't find the chamber, eccentric. There are times when the tooth has an abnormal anatomy, but usually you find that it is right in the center. So when you open it,
Okay.
usually you enter into the chamber. When it is shifted, it does cause problems. That is when we tend to perforate because we're not expecting it to be shifted. So usually what we do is we enter into the chamber from the if it is imagine if you're entering into a upper molar, it is usually we avoid the area of the oblique ridge, and next to that is in the mesial area, next mesially to the oblique ridge, we open into the this thing, pulp chamber. So if it is not there, it would have, that is the normal area. If it is eccentric, it would have shifted.
And there is one question from Dr. Shafiq that is while talking about post space preparation, told something RCF. Can you explain, ma'am?
So
RCF,
RCF is root
root
canal
canal
filling.
filling.
Sorry,
Okay.
filling. I just made it short for I mean root canal filling.
Okay. And there
RCF.
is another question: how to have control in placing a barrier in case of large perforations?
Yeah, so barrier is usually a hemostatic material. So what we do is we take a small portion. It is easily manipulated. There is no issue in holding it or removing. You can cut a small piece. It's something like a kind of a cotton-like material. The usual hemostat which is used, that you can remove a small portion from it and carefully take it with a tweezer and place into the according to your size. You can place it into a this thing into the perforated area. Obviously, we'll do it only for large perforations. So you can place it, and then on top of that, you place your. You have to leave space for your MTA. So after placing the barrier, you place your place the MTA.
Okay, there's another question from Sumesh Mohandas. The same question: how to place a barrier to prevent the extra flow of material? I think you explained it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
hope you've understood. If
And
you want details, I can always go in and let you know later.
okay, and I think another question that is
Other materials, other materials we can use is freeze-dried bone can also be used. Hydroxyapatite can be mixed with saline and placed. This will
uh,
also act as a barrier
and
because it is dissolvable.
okay, there's a query from Haris Mubarak, and please explain about hydroxyapatite.
Hydroxyapatite is the structure that forms the tooth, right? So obviously it is very biocompatible. So when we use it as a reparative material, it will induce cementogenesis, dentinogenesis, and osteogenesis. So all these will happen naturally. We are inducing all this because it is being a compatible material. All this can be done. So hydroxyapatite has such uses, and I don't know if you want to know anything more. Is
Okay.
that enough?
Okay. And there's another question that is how to place GIC in middle root perforation.
Okay. GIC, what I usually do is, you can only, it has to be in a flowable consistency. Only then can you make it move into the canal. So once you have finished your BMP, what you do is clean the canal as much as possible. If it is really bleeding, it is very difficult to condense GIC into that. So the best option would be to use MTA. If it is not bleeding badly, then we can control the bleeding, make GIC in a flowable consistency, take a small spreader and load it into the canal. And what we do is, what I usually, I mean, I don't, it is not the ideal protocol. What I do is, I take a sterile file, I dip it in alcohol, spirit, and I gently condense. So when you've dipped it in alcohol, it is easier to condense because it does not stick onto the this thing file. So the condensation is easier that way. You can use spreaders also, hand condensers also can be used, and you can correct the perforation.
Okay, and another query from Nurul Islam, that is it okay to place MTA as sealant or use MTA based sealer?
Both are correct. Both would serve the same purpose. MTA-based sealers have all functions and properties of MTA, so it would same purpose would be served. It won't be a problem. MTA as such would be, it is very hard. It's like it has a big consistency when it is set. So if you have any plans of doing a re-RCT, it is very difficult to negotiate. You can't go through it. So a sealant would be a better option in such cases when you are expecting a re-RCT.
Okay. There's another question from Veena Jaydevan. That is how to place calcium hydroxide barrier in large perforation, light cure, calcium hydroxide or powder?
Powder, not light pure calcium hydroxide. Powder is mixed with saline, and it is used. It is a small. You can use your cement carrier, and it is picked up and placed into the canal, and it can be condensed because it is usually calcium hydroxide powder is mixed with saline. It does not stick much. It is not condensation is not a very big problem in case of calcium hydroxide.
Okay, the same question from Asainar Kitty. Can we use light cure calcium hydroxide as perforation repair material? I think you explained.
It's not a preferred material. You probably can. I don't think there is any big contraindication there, but usually it is not used.
Another question from Shahul Hamid. In strip perforation, can we fill that route with MTA?
The whole route.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that if it is possible for you to manipulate and condense properly. You can do a 3D condensation using hand pluggers or anything which you feel is comfortable. If that is possible, you can do. But the thing is, it is not usually easy to condense the whole canal with MDA because once you press, that part will go down, the other part will come up. Just like how you do condensation it is not very easy. So there would be spaces. So the whole canal, if it is a huge, perforation and it is not difficult, it is very difficult to handle, you can do that. But it is a very tedious procedure and it can, there would be spaces.
Okay, another question from Veena Jaydevan. How to place flowable composite because of errors due to post-space preparation?
Flowable composite, once you recognize the area of perforation, flowable composite usually comes in a syringe, right? So it is very easily you can locate the area, isolate it, preferably, sterilize it with chlorhexidine and apply this thing, flowable composite. So what will happen is it will easily flow. There is not much of a problem with that. I mean, you won't find it difficult.
And another query from Haris Mubarak. Rubber dam to be used before or after access preparation?
That is what I said, because when we apply the rubber dam onto the tooth, the orientation of the tooth becomes difficult because we don't see the rest of the tooth. So if you have a problem, because we'll be opening the access cavity with a burr and we won't be using any hand instruments, there won't be a big problem, because if you perforate, it is a bigger problem. So you can open the axis and then place the rubber dam. Preferably, it is the other way around. But if the situation calls for, you can always open it and then place the rubber dam, because usually rubber dam is more important for the irrigation and the instrument ingestion. All those things is more important when compared to your axis cavity.
Okay, there's a question from Shafiq MC. How to manage flare up?
And obviously, you should connect it with the case. Now, if it is a patient with a big periodontal issue or a periapical lesion, each case it would differ. Normally, what we do is we give an antibiotic and an analgesic, and we ask the patient to take it for 5 days. It could be the normal flare up. So unless there is a big issue, you don't have to worry. You can just give the normal antibiotic and analgesic. If the patient is having a lesion, you can also follow up with the anaerobic. That is, you can also give emetrogen.
Okay, and another question from Shahul Hamid, that is, can we use any hemostatic agent to control bleeding in furcal perforation before placing MTA?
Yeah, you can. If, only the bleeding, not as a barrier, is it? You can, but the thing is, once you have, if it is only for controlling the bleeding, you'll have to remove. Usually, we use it as a barrier. If it is used as a barrier, you don't have to remove it. But only for controlling the bleeding, you have to remove it. But usually, we don't do that. If it is for perforation repair, you have to keep it there and then place the reparative material on top.
Okay, another question from Rajesh Kumar. Can you explain about post-space perforation? Post-space perforation.
Post-space perforation usually occurs when we are not aware of the direction, because you are not, you cannot see the canal. You are not aware where you're going. So that is when that happens. So the best way is to learn your radiograph. You'll have your obturative. You have to have an obturative radiograph. So when we have that, I don't think there is a big problem in identifying. So, and another method you can be sure of is by making a pilot hole before you make the whole post space. Make a pilot hole once you've seen, once you are okay, you're sure you haven't perforated, you can then slowly enlarge. Instead of going directly with the piezoramas, we can start with the with a small pilot hole, be sure, and then continue.
Okay, next queries will be asked by Dr. Abia. Please come forward.
Next question is from Dr. Noorul Islam. How to distinguish mid-root perforation and lateral canal using paper point method?
Can you repeat, please?
How to distinguish mid-root perforation and lateral canal using paper point?
Okay. I don't think we can, be so sure if there is a lateral canal. Usually, there is not very obvious bleeding from lateral canals. Usually, it would have been cleared by the BMP. Lateral canals usually, if you have done proper irrigation, the lateral canals would have been clean. So then we won't have obvious bleeding from lateral canals. Bleeding is usually when you have gone beyond the apex. Normally, when you have, depending upon the BMP, that is not normally encountered. Like the question you asked is using a paper point, you cannot clearly distinguish, no, because you can't say. It could be pulpal bleeding, it could be periapical bleeding.
Okay, could you please elaborate on MTA application for furcal or cervical perforation?
The thing is, first what we do is rubber dam the tooth, isolate properly, preferably control the bleeding because it would give us a more visualization. Once you've done that, you've almost controlled the bleeding. You have to place GP points, or you can use GP points, you can use paper points, you can use files. You have to keep all the canals patent. So you have to put all the files in the canal. I use files usually because they are more easily, you can handle it more easily because you have a tip there, the handle there. So which we can, so you place them in the canal, you manipulate your MTA, and using a carrier, MTA carrier, you can easily, like how you use an amalgam carrier, you can pick up the MTA and place it into the percussion area. Once that is done, what I usually do is, you have many methods. What I prefer is take small cotton pellets, wet cotton pellets, and condense into the area of perforation. And while doing so, once you've finished placing your MTA, you have to make sure that you slightly move your files which are there in the canal up and down and rotate them so that you do not lose the patency of your canals, because the MTA will inadvertently fall into the canal. So this can be prevented by the moving the canals before it is going in for setting. I hope you've understood.
Okay, ma'am. Why is there pain when there is a perforation?
Because what happens is, when the tooth is anesthetized, the periapical area more often is not. It is actually a fault on our part that the periapical area is not anesthetized. But in a way, it acts as a blessing. You find that when we do intrude into the periapical area, the patient usually has pain. Even if we give a inferior alveolar nerve block, it differs. Sometimes the patient might not have pain because the anesthesia is profound. But most cases we find that if you go very much, I mean, just not even not in cases of perforation, if we go very much beyond the apex into the periapical area, the patient usually has pain. And second sitting, if you want to experience this phenomenon, it's better if you give in the second sitting, don't give anesthesia at all, so that if you ever perforate, you can easily come to know. So both chances are there. Usually the patient has pain.
Next question is, won't flowable composite cause hindrance of pore space?
Yeah, so you once, because what we are doing is correcting the fault in the pore space. So once you have corrected the perforation, you will have to prepare the pore space again. What we have done is, we have corrected the perforation, right? So the pore space has to be prepared again. Only then can you place the post, because the space would have obviously been filled by the composite, or whatever composite material which we have used will obviously flow into the post space. The space has to be recreated. Only then can we place the post. Dr. Rabi, I can't hear you. You're muted. Hello?
Hello. Okay.
Yeah, Dr. Rashid Rabia. Dr. Rabia is not
I think
audible.
okay. The last question was how to differentiate pulpal and perforation bleeding. Is that question answered?
Pulpal and perforation bleeding. Lateral canal was asked.
Okay. Just this question from
Okay.
Harris.
Yeah. Pulpal and perforational bleeding. Yeah, this is a difficult task, yeah, because when we are opening the axis for the first time, it can be both. The pulpal bleeding will obviously be there, and if you have perforated, the periapical bleeding will also be there. So it is very difficult. So one thing we can do is put the file in the canal, and obviously canal will not have a problem when you use the apex locator. If you put it into the area of perforation, you can very much find out if you have perforated. So that is actually the only way we can. By the bleeding alone, we cannot be sure, because it could be both. Sometimes, mostly in young patients, the bleeding is very profuse. You can't make out. Second sitting, you can have a doubt, because second sitting you would have the pulp tissue would have dried up, and there would not be any profuse bleeding. And in the second sitting, if you have profuse bleeding, you can be almost sure. And again, you can confirm with your apex locator and radiograph if you are still in doubt.
And another question from Shafiq MC, that is, if patient comes with flare up, should we remove the temporary filling and give open dressing, or keep closed and put patient on antibiotics? That's what will we do if there is an flare up between.
Okay. If the patient has severe swelling and you feel that removing the temporary filling will give a relief, one thing you can do is, first thing is remove, in any case, remove the restoration, irrigate, and preferably, if the patient is cooperative enough, you can do a small BMP also. Give proper irrigation and calcium hydroxide dressing, or calcium hydroxide with chlorhexidine or metapex. Anything can be given. This will relieve the patient, hopefully. If it is if there is no swelling and the patient is like having a normal post-operative pain, analgesic and antibiotics are enough. But if the patient has come to you, it will always be more reassuring for the patient if you do a BMP and tell and give your antibiotics anyways. That is for sure you have to give, but doing a BMP will reduce symptoms. And if there is a swelling, you definitely have to remove the, or if there is a draining sinus or anything like that, closed dressing is the best choice. But if you have a draining sinus, you can remove the restoration and ask the patient to come the very next day, because obviously keeping an open dressing is asking for more trouble, because your saliva and your oral flora is going to affect the tooth even more. So closed dressing is always the best. Open dressing in cases of very active bleeding or drainage. I hope you've understood.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay. There's some more queries, and we will bind up very soon. And the question is, do we place MTA immediately after we control the bleeding? It's a question from Dr. Prasida.
Okay. Now, MTA is the best benefit about MTA is that small bleeding does not make a problem in any setting reaction or anything. In fact, the moisture is required for the setting of MTA. So control of moisture and bleeding is not an issue when concerned with MTA. So if it is difficult to control the bleeding, you can always give MTA and not worry about it.
And the final question, that is Veena Jaydevan. Etching time for flowable composite used for mid-root perforation, or during post-preparation. Etching time for flowable composite used for perforation.
That depends on what material you're using. If usually the normal 15 to 20 seconds is only required, normal. And if you're using a dual cure or a self-cure or different kinds of composite, the ones you're using, you'll have the manufacturer's instructions. You have to follow them accordingly. It will differ from material to material. It depends on the material you're using. For normal flowable composite, which we use, the one in the syringe, it requires only the normal time. That is, preferably you can also etch the post also. Etch the post also. That will help in better bonding. 15 to 20 seconds is enough. Dr. Rashid, you are
Hi.
not audible.
Okay. Now we are going to wind up, and
Yeah.
I request Dr. Joy Thomas sir to come forward and deliver few words about our today's program, today's webinar.
Hello,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
am I audible?
Yeah. You can
Yes,
proceed.
Very good morning to all. And it is a
Morning,
very
sir.
excellent presentation, and I really appreciate Dr. Nasreen because I'm practicing for so many years, and it has been very elaborate, very much educated
Thank
and
you so much,
informative.
sir. Thank you.
All the participants, even including myself. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart, and I
Thank
wish
you so much, sir.
And thank you, Joy Thomas sir. And now I invite our Honorable Secretary, Dr. Abdul Rashid EM, for delivering few words.
Hello, Rashid.
Yeah, you are audible.
Can you? Okay. It was a good presentation, but I couldn't be with you the whole time because of some technical problems. Anyway, good one. It was good one. Now it's the time to wind up because we have another one state CD is going on, just started. So we have to wind up the session. I request Dr. Nurul Islam to come forward, or over to Dr. Abia, WDC chairperson. Okay.
First of all, let me thank our faculty, Dr. Nasreen, who is also our own WDC member, for such a wonderful presentation. I also thank Dr. Millie James for being with us. She's always an inspiration for us. Thank you, ma'am. Let me thank our Kondoti branch president, Dr. Mohinuddin, secretary, Dr. Abdul Rashid, and CD chairman, Dr. Nurul Islam. Also, our executive members and WDC members who have been very supportive. And last but not the least, I thank the participants for being with us. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Rashid.
Okay.
Okay, we can wind up now.
Noor sir. No?
Yes.
Noor Islam.
Yes.
Okay, say a few words.
Hello.
Yeah, you are audible. Proceed.
Wonderful session for us. Thank you for a wonderful session for us.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Noor.
Thank you for everyone for a wonderful session and for your participation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Noor Islam.
Hello.
Yes.
Oh, hello.
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 Not audible. Dr. Monuddin is not audible.
Okay. I think I unmuted him.
Yeah.
Moji doctor. Okay.
Okay, okay. Okay, there is a state CD webinar going on.
We
Please
can
go.
wind up.
Okay, let us wind up.
Uh,
Zoom meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.